Hello, good evening. Welcome to GLBT Issues in Literature. Oh, hey, Clyde. I'm your instructor, Rachel Hansen. Uh, now, as ever, if you find that you are just here to comment on what a woman on the internet looks like, this is not the place for you. But if you're here to learn and engage in dialogue, then I'm really glad that you are here. Whew, what a day, huh? Um, I feel like in my day job, I'm kind of at the point in the semester where, like, things generally are running pretty smoothly. But then when things go wrong, oh, it's a big deal. Um, right? It's not the small annoyances, it's the big stuff. Um, well, I know that I am feeling a little mentally fatigued this evening. Um, so if you are too, you're in good company. But I think more than that, right, as we talk about this week's module of waking up and staying afloat, it really to me is more about, maybe not more about, but just as much about um, like these last few weeks. Um, Again, particularly here in the United States. I just realized that I had the wrong microphone selected, so hopefully y'all can hear me okay. Um, um, right, it's just been a challenging time. Now, I'm sure that I have brought this up before, but I am very dedicated to seeing my therapist regularly. For a little over a year, I was seeing her every week. And then just because of some schedule changes in my own life, we've moved to every other week. And this was, I mean, at this point, actually, about a month ago, she asked how I was doing. I'll be honest, I was not doing great. And I said, I feel like I hate everything. And that is true, but not, hopefully not, weirdly, in a negative way, right? Like, this is just a time where you have to try to make a difference even though you're feeling discouraged. And I hope that that's what we can kind of gain together from this week. So we're moving here into chapter 6 of All Boys Aren't Blue, which is called You Can't Swim in Cowboy Boots. Which, I gotta be honest, I just thought that was a very cleverly named and just rather funny name for a chapter. Clearly it's true. You can't swim in cowboy boots. They're really heavy and they'll fill with water. So unless you have calves of steel, you're not going anywhere in cowboy boots. Now, where this came up for George as a young kid, right, like 1992, 1993, when his grandma was bringing him and his brother and his cousins on their summer trips. This particular summer, she wanted to get everybody sneakers. And they were all really stoked. Now, cross colors was the thing, I guess, at the time. Right now, like everybody who is here this evening was alive in 1992, 1993. But I'll be real honest, I was an early elementary aged kid who was honestly pretty poor. Oh shoot. Okay. Sorry, I was frozen there for a second. So I am going to take George's word for this because all my clothes were coming from my cousins or from the thrift shop. We weren't getting cross colors. But he described them like so vividly before getting to the cowboy boot part of this whole thing. I had to look them up, and I was really disappointed to discover that cross colors does not make sneakers anymore. But tons of people are selling them on eBay, and they're cool. Like, I don't think I need to tell you guys that, right? Like, Clyde's reacting. He knows what cross colors are. So it's just an area of ignorance for me. But yeah, they just seem like real cool sneakers. But again, little George, he didn't want them. He didn't want sneakers. He wanted cowboy boots. His grandma, coolest lady ever, brings him into a cowboy shop to get him his kicks, right? Now, his cousins were super embarrassed by his appearance, right? But walking around Disneyland the day after getting their new shoes, he says, despite how ridiculous I may have looked, I was happy that day. Which I think really is the thing of it, isn't it? That, frankly, as long as you're not hurting anybody, what's the big deal? You should do what makes you happy. But the reason that he brings up swimming, right, with the cowboy boots tail, is because he also spent a lot of time that summer learning how to swim, which is, for our Black brothers and sisters, kind of a big deal, right? Statistically, Black folks don't learn how to swim, even now, and that's kind of just a long-standing holdover from segregation, where public pools were not available anywhere. And I think just as a kind of a segue off to the side here, something that I would encourage you to sit with for a little while is thinking about things that are revolutionary for you that might not be for somebody else. Right? Like for me, right? Like white people usually learn how to swim. My dad also swims competitively. He's competed in the Senior Olympics. I was always going to learn how to swim. My Black friends often no. So maybe just take a minute, sit down and think about things that are a real big deal for you that might not be for somebody of a different lived experience. But here in this, right, as he's learning how to swim, I really love it because I think that swimming is an extremely apt metaphor for our lives, right? Because in a space and in a time where we often are fighting to be our authentic selves, we have to ask ourselves, like, sometimes literally, but more often metaphorically. Am I willing to swim? While also recognizing that, and I quote, that decision isn't always ours to make. I have an excellent coworker, and she and I talk about parenting quite a bit when we, every week when we work together. Um, and one thing that we talk about is that, especially as like our kids are getting older, and so younger people will come to us sometimes for advice. Oh, excuse me. And they'll say, right, like, how do you do it? And that fits in really well with the sometimes you don't have a decision. You just have to swim. But you might not know how you're doing it, right? You're doing it because you have to. And then the end of chapter 6, Johnson asks us, I think, a question that is something we should be asking ourselves all the time, basically, which is, are you teaching people how to swim, or are you letting them drown? And I think that's just something to sit and think about here for a minute. Before we transition to the next section, as you know, I often will have a cup of tea here with me. I was a little impatient this evening. I didn't let the water boil all the way, and now I'm really regretting that decision because my tea is a little bit colder now than I would like for it to be. That's just how it goes down sometimes, I guess, isn't it? Right, so kind of moving on to Zami, a new spelling of my name. We're looking in chapters brain fart there for a minute. I believe 12 and 13. We have Audre Lorde, who is still, obviously, growing up in pre-civil rights America. Gosh, that would really be a twist of a book if, I don't know, there was just some kind of a time machine, maybe halfway through. But that's not how we experience time. So she's still, right, pre-civil rights America and trying to find her own place in the world. And without the loving adult support that George Johnson had in the 1990s. But she was really kind of sitting in this, like, figuring out her own self-identity with a group of friends in her high school to work out who they were as women in the world. They were not thinking about race as part of that. And she shared that they thought, and I quote, we could conquer it by ignoring it. Right? So that if they could just go, yeah, no, blinders on, I refuse to accept that racism is real, then it would just go away. Unfortunately, not the case, right? But she went along just ignoring the impact that race had on her life and the lives of her peers of color until she confided in a high school guidance counselor about her challenges at home. Which, right, as we've spent weeks now talking about, were significant, right? Now, the guidance counselor reported what Audre had shared to her mother. Her mother was not happy about it. And their reaction caused her to come to a pretty devastating conclusion. And that was, and again I quote, "If my parents loved me, I wouldn't annoy them so much. Since they didn't love me, they deserve to be annoyed as much as possible within the bounds of my own self-preservation." And that, poor Audre. To come to the conclusion and truly believe that she deserved to be treated as a nuisance by people who should have loved her. Now, as we are kind of going through this 2-chapter pairing in Zami, one thing that is clear to me that she does not say in quite so many words is that she really is growing into the belief that ignorance cannot equal conquering, and that she really needs to have a more woke attitude. And I think that that's something that we all can learn from as well. And examples of, where we might see ignorance. And I'm thinking back actually to last semester when we talked about unpacking the invisible knapsack. That right when we're talking about race, lots of people that I know will refer to themselves as colorblind. Now, I would view that as ignoring it, right? Which is not acceptable, right? Like, if we want to change things for the better, we need to see things for what they are rather than as we wish that they were. Now, this feels a little silly. We're going to be the next few weeks looking at some journal articles that are in journals of psychology. And that is because we're talking so much about kind of the development of self that both George Johnson and Audre Lorde are experiencing and reporting to us as readers, right, through their memoirs. But this one that we'll be talking about this week is actually not a full-on journal article. It's actually an editorial that was published in the Journal of Applied Developmental Psychology. And it's called Critical Consciousness, New Directions for Understanding Its Development During Adolescence. Now, one thing that they talk about, or they being the authors of this editorial, Luke Rappa and G. John Geldof. It really is always about 20 minutes in that my mouth just starts getting impossibly dry. So that's where we're at. Anyway, so our two authors, Rappa and Geldof, talk about really the significant body of work that already exists around how critical consciousness can be measured, how it develops in the first place, and then the various antecedents and associated outcomes of critical consciousness. Now, antecedent is not a word that we use I think, in our regular everyday lives. It's one that I use so regularly that I usually have to look it up to jog my own memory every time I use it to make sure that I am using it correctly. So if you are in that boat, antecedent is a thing or event that exists before another, right? So when I think about an antecedent, as a parent, I often think about like the milestones of my children, uh, right? Like an antecedent would be drinking milk before starting in on solid foods, right? Like it's that type of like, kind of event sequencing. Anyway, that was a little bit of a sidetrack, but hopefully it was helpful to you. um, as they continue in their editorial, uh, they also ask us some questions that allow us to see where research in the field is falling short a little bit. Uh, the one that I want to focus on today is, and I quote, "For whom and under what conditions can critical consciousness be fostered?" Um, and it's this question where I honestly really do think that our conversations about intersectional feminism um, can help us move forward in a helpful way. Um, both, right, like as we're really constantly striving towards an actively anti-racist way of being that, you know, if you're me, right, also rejects patriarchy and capitalism as it presently exists. Right, intersectional feminism is a framework that we need to move forward in this. But it's also the framework that can give us compassion for our younger selves, um, right, as we're on our learning journeys, um, and can also help us to guide those who are in a different place in their journeys than we are. Now, in the module, I wrote about young people because, of course, we're talking about George Johnson and Audre Lorde as young people. But I think this really applies to anybody that you are in community and relationship with. Um, and so, as we're thinking about the experiences that are shared with us, either right, like face to face, or right, like in a memoir, like the ones that we're reading this semester, right, we can see how the trusted adults in their lives really helped them or not, right? um, and then how we can kind of adapt our own approach to be a little bit more helpful and collaborative, while also giving grace to ourselves and to those around us. Uh, Now, that is all that I have for you this week. Um, Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. Uh, Now, I will see you, of course, in your inboxes next Monday. Um, Sorry, I'm looking over at my calendar and realizing that next Monday is in March already. And that's hard for me to believe. So I will see you again in your inboxes on Monday, March 2nd. And then back here live on Wednesday, March 4th, to talk a little bit more about our next module is called The Seen and the Unseen. So kind of how we're perceiving ourselves and those around us, which I think is going to be a really good conversation. So I hope you have a great week, and I will see you in just a few days.